The ancient bells of Astro's prime had not rung in 3,000 years. Their deep, mournful sound now echoed across the crystal spires of the capital world, carrying a message that froze the hearts of 1 trillion beings across the galaxy. Empress Lyra Eth was dying. In the deepest chamber of the imperial palace, surrounded by walls of living diamond that pulsed with their own inner light, the most powerful being in known space lay motionless on a bed of crystallized starlight. Her body, once a magnificent display of shifting colors that could blind lesser beings with its beauty, now flickered like a candle in the wind. The bioluminescent veins that ran beneath her translucent skin had faded from brilliant gold to a sickly green, and with each passing hour, they grew dimmer still. Dr. Vorn pressed his 6-fingered hand against the monitoring crystal beside the imperial bed. The readings made his twin heart sink deeper into despair. The void plague was unlike anything he had encountered in his 4 centuries of practicing medicine. It did not attack the body in any conventional way. Instead, it seemed to drain the very essence of life itself, as if something was slowly erasing the Empress from existence. "How long does she have?" asked General Theron, his usually steady voice cracking with emotion. The old warrior had served the Empire for 200 years, fighting in battles across a dozen star systems, but he had never faced an enemy like this. Dr. Vorn's antennae drooped with exhaustion. He had not left the medical bay in 6 days. At this rate of decline, perhaps a week, maybe less. The words hit the assembled council like a physical blow. Chancellor Mira, her serpentine body coiled with tension, spoke what they were all thinking. Without her connection to the neural crown, the Empire will collapse within days. The psychic network that binds our worlds together will fail. Chaos will follow. They all knew she was right. The Empress was not just a ruler in the traditional sense. Through the neural crown, a living organism that had bonded with her brain. At birth, she maintained a constant connection with every major world in the Empire. Her thoughts helped coordinate trade, her emotions brought peace to warring factions, and her very life force held together the complex web of relationships that kept 1,000 different species from tearing each other apart. Already, reports were coming in from the outer systems. On Vega 7, the silicon-based rockmen had begun territorial disputes with their carbon-based neighbors. The gas giant colonies of Tau Ceti were demanding independence, sensing weakness in the imperial structure. Pirates and raiders, held in check for centuries by the fear of imperial justice, were beginning to test the borders. Dr. Vorn had tried everything. The Lumians, those ethereal beings of pure light who could heal wounds with a touch, had spent days channeling their energy into the Empress. The result had been worse than useless. The plague seemed to feed on their healing light, growing stronger with each attempt to cure it. The crystallites had arrived next, their geometric forms shifting through dimensions as they worked. These beings could restructure matter at the molecular level, building new organs from base elements if needed. They had attempted to purge the plague by completely rebuilding the Empress's circulatory system. The plague had simply adapted, spreading to the new tissue within hours. Even the Voidborn had come, ancient beings of pure energy who remembered the birth of the first stars. They claimed to have seen every form of death and decay in their billions of years of existence. But the void plague baffled them completely. It was not death as they understood it, but something far worse, an unmaking, a return to nothingness that defied the natural order. "There must be something we have not tried," insisted Admiral Rex Kane, his mechanical arm whirring as he gestured at the holographic displays showing the Empress's condition. Half his body had been replaced with cybernetic implants after a battle with space pirates, making him one of the most advanced human-machine hybrids in the Empire. "Our medical databases contain the healing knowledge of 10,000 species. We have consulted them all," Dr. Vorn replied wearily. The DeepMind Collective offered to transfer her consciousness into their quantum matrices, but that would not be the Empress anymore. It would be a copy. The Syntharks suggested full cybernetic conversion, but the plague attacked synthetic components as readily as organic ones. We even sent messages to the Oracle worlds, but their AI networks can only calculate probabilities for scenarios they understand. This is beyond their programming. Chancellor Mira uncoiled herself, rising to her full height of 12 feet. What about the entropy lords? They are beings of destruction and decay. Perhaps they understand this plague. General Theron's scarred face twisted in disgust. We will not bargain with those creatures. They would demand a price worse than the Empress's death. Then what do you suggest? Mira's forked tongue flicked out in agitation. We sit here and watch the greatest civilization in galactic history crumble because we are too proud to consider desperate measures? The argument might have continued, but a soft chime from the medical bay's communication system interrupted them. Dr. Vorn activated the holographic display, revealing the image of his assistant, Dr. Naya. Sir, I have completed the analysis you requested on the Empress's cellular breakdown patterns, she reported, her blue-tinted skin pale with exhaustion. The results are troubling. Show us, Dr. Vorn commanded. The hologram shifted to display a three-dimensional model of the Empress's cells. Even to the untrained eye, something was clearly wrong. Where healthy cells should have been vibrant and active, these appeared to be fading away like smoke. The plague is not destroying the cells, Dr. Naya explained. It is making them forget how to exist. Each infected cell loses its cohesion at the quantum level, as if the fundamental forces that hold matter together are being switched off one by one. Admiral Kane leaned forward, his cybernetic eye focusing on the display. Is this some kind of weapon? Could an enemy have done this? Unknown, Dr. Naya admitted. We have never encountered anything like it. The plague seems to specifically target highly organized biological systems. The more complex and advanced the organism, the faster it spreads. Dr. Vorn felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. That would explain why all our advanced treatments have failed. Each time we use sophisticated healing technology, we give the plague more complex systems to attack. Then we need something simple, General Theron said suddenly. Something primitive. The others stared at him. The concept of using primitive technology to solve a problem was almost unthinkable to beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel and could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Think about it, the old soldier continued. Our ancestors survived for millions of years before we developed advanced medicine. They fought diseases with crude tools and basic chemistry. Maybe that simplicity is exactly what we need. Admiral, Kane's expression was skeptical. You want us to treat the most important being in the galaxy with Stone Age medicine? I want us to save her life, Theron replied firmly. And if that means looking beyond our technological superiority, then so be it. Dr. Vorn was quiet for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. The idea was insane, but then again every conventional approach had failed spectacularly. There are species in our databases that we have not contacted, he said slowly. Primitive worlds that have not yet developed space travel. Their medical knowledge would be laughably crude by our standards, but perhaps... Do it, Chancellor Mira commanded. Search every database. Find the most primitive species with any medical knowledge at all. Our pride means nothing if the Empress dies. As the Council dispersed to begin this desperate search, Dr. Vorn remained beside the Empress's bed. Her breathing had become so shallow that the monitoring crystals could barely detect it. Time was running out, and their last hope lay with creatures so primitive they had not even learned to leave their home worlds. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, an answer waited among the stars. The data streams flowed like digital waterfalls across the screens of the Imperial Research Center, carrying information about thousands of primitive worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. Dr. Cale Vorn's research teams had been working for 18 straight hours, analyzing the medical practices of species that most galactic citizens would consider barely above animal intelligence. Dr. Naya rubbed her tired eyes and gestured at the display showing their current analysis. We have reviewed medical data from 437 pre-spaceflight civilizations, she reported. Most of them use plant-based compounds or basic surgical techniques. Nothing that seems applicable to the Empress's condition. Doctor. Vorn felt his hope beginning to fade. Time was running short. The latest reports from the medical bay showed that the Empress's neural activity had dropped to barely detectable levels. The neural crown itself was beginning to wither, its crystalline structure losing cohesion as its host weakened. "Keep searching," he commanded. "There has to be something we have missed." Across the research center, his teams continued their desperate work. The linguist section was running translation protocols on medical text from worlds where beings still carved their knowledge into stone tablets. The biology department was analyzing blood samples from species that had never left their home systems. The technology assessment group was studying healing methods that used nothing more advanced than sharpened metal and boiled water. It was Dr. Pela from the Xenobiology division who made the discovery that changed everything. She had been analyzing the blood chemistry data from a small world in the Orion Arm when something in the readings made her pause. "Dr. Vorn," she called out, her voice tight with excitement. "You need to see this." Dr. Vorn hurried over to her workstation, where a three-dimensional model of an alien circulatory system rotated slowly on the display. The species was called human, according to the database, and they inhabited a blue-green world they called Earth. "What am I looking at?" he asked. Dr. Pela pointed to the blood chemistry analysis. "These beings use iron-based hemoglobin for oxygen transport. Primitive by our standards, but look at their immune system complexity." Dr. Vorn studied the data, his antennae twitching with interest. Human immune systems were unlike anything he had seen before. Where most advanced species had evolved elegant, efficient methods for fighting disease, humans appeared to have developed a system based on overwhelming, aggressive response to any foreign presence in their bodies. "Their white blood cells attack everything," Dr. Pela explained. "They do not discriminate between different types of threats. If something does not belong in their system, they destroy it through sheer numbers and determination." "Crude, but effective," Dr. Vorn murmured. "What about their medical practices?" Dr. Pela brought up another display. "That is where it gets interesting. They use simple chemical compounds, what they call antibiotics and antivirals. But more importantly, they have developed something called blood transfusion. They can transfer blood directly from one individual to another." Dr. Vorn felt his twin heart skip a beat. "Show me their survival rates against unknown pathogens." The data that appeared on the screen was remarkable. Humans routinely survived exposure to diseases that would kill most other species within hours. Their aggressive immune systems, combined with their iron-based blood chemistry, seemed to create an environment that was hostile to almost every form of biological threat. "There is more," Dr. Pela continued. "These beings have something called military veterans, individuals who have survived extreme physical stress and exposure to biological weapons. Their immune systems show adaptation patterns unlike anything in our medical databases." Dr. Vorn was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. The idea was insane. The humans were so primitive they had not even developed faster than light travel. Their medicine was thousands of years behind galactic standards. But their very primitiveness might be exactly what the Void Plague could not adapt to. "Access their population data," he commanded. "Find me the healthiest, most resilient specimen on their world." The search algorithms went to work, processing data from the human world's primitive communication networks. The parameters were specific. They needed someone with extensive exposure to biological threats, maximum immune system development, and the physical resilience to survive what they were about to ask of them. The results narrowed down to several candidates, but one stood out above all others. David Brooks, a 45-year-old former military medic living in an isolated mountain region. His service record, extracted from crude digital files, showed exposure to more biological hazards than seemed possible for any organic being to survive. He has been exposed to chemical weapons, biological agents, and at least 15 different disease outbreaks, Dr. Pela reported. His blood work shows antibodies to pathogens that do not even exist on most worlds, and according to his military records, he has extensive field medical experience. Dr. Vorn studied the primitive image of David Brooks on the screen. The human looked unremarkable by galactic standards. No visible cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications, no signs of advanced biological evolution. He appeared to be exactly what he was, a simple being from a backward world who had survived through nothing more than determination and crude medical knowledge. He will have to do, Dr. Vorn decided. Prepare a stealth ship for immediate departure. We cannot afford to follow first contact protocols. Admiral Rex Kane was summoned to oversee the mission personally. The situation had deteriorated further, while the research teams worked. The Shadow Fleet had advanced ahead of schedule and would reach the outer defense perimeter within 2 days. The Imperial Navy was struggling to coordinate its response without. The Empress's psychic network and several outer worlds had already fallen to panic and disorder. You want me to authorize the kidnapping of a primitive alien? Admiral Kane asked when Dr. Vorn explained the plan. I want you to authorize the salvation of the Empire, Dr. Vorn replied. This human may be our last hope. The stealth ship Silent Wing departed from Astros Prime 12 hours later, its hull wrapped in probability fields that made it virtually invisible to both sensors and direct observation. The crew consisted of Dr. Vorn, 2 medical assistants, and a small diplomatic team trained in first contact procedures. The journey to Earth took 3 days at maximum hyperspace velocity. During the trip, Dr. Vorn studied everything the databases contained about human psychology and culture. These beings were remarkably violent by galactic standards, having fought wars continuously throughout their recorded history. But they also showed unusual capacity for self-sacrifice and cooperation in the face of overwhelming odds. How do we approach him? Asked Dr. Naya during the final approach to Earth. These beings have no concept of galactic civilization. To them, we will be completely alien. Dr. Vorn had given this considerable thought. We tell him the truth. From what I understand of human psychology, they respond well to direct requests for help, especially when lives are at stake. The Silent Wing settled into orbit around Earth under full stealth configuration. The planet was beautiful in its primitive way, with swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans unmarred by the geometric perfection of advanced terraforming. Sensor sweeps located David Brooks in his mountain home, a simple structure that would have been considered barely adequate shelter on most civilized worlds. The away team materialized in the clearing outside his home, using personal teleporters, their forms shimmering into existence in the afternoon sunlight. David Brooks emerged from his dwelling within seconds, moving with the careful alertness of someone accustomed to danger. He was armed with a primitive chemical projectile weapon, but his posture suggested wariness rather than immediate aggression. Dr. Vorn stepped forward, activating his universal translator. The device would convert his speech into the local language, though the translation might be imperfect given the primitive nature of human communication systems. David Brooks, he began, we need your help. The human stared at them for a long moment, taking in their alien appearance with remarkable composure. Dr. Vorn had expected fear, panic, perhaps even aggression. Instead, David Brooks lowered his weapon and spoke in a calm, steady voice. Let me guess. Someone important is dying, and your fancy medicine is not working. Dr. Vorn was startled by the accuracy of the assessment. How did you know? David Brooks smiled grimly. Because nobody travels across space to ask a mountain medic for help, unless they are completely out of options. What is it? Some kind of disease your advanced technology cannot handle? The explanation took nearly an hour. Dr. Vorn told him about the Empire, the Empress, the Void Plague, and the failure of every advanced civilization to find a cure. He explained how the plague seemed to feed on complexity and sophistication, growing stronger with each attempt to fight it, using advanced medical technology. David Brooks listened without interruption, occasionally asking questions that showed a surprising grasp of the medical principles involved despite his primitive background. When the explanation was finished, he was quiet for several minutes. You think my blood might work because it is too simple for this plague to adapt to, he finally said. That is our theory, Dr. Vorn admitted. And if I agree to help, what are my chances of survival? Dr. Vorn hesitated. The truth was that they had no idea what introducing human blood into an alien physiology might do. Unknown. But without your help, billions of beings will die when the Empire collapses. David Brooks looked at his simple mountain home, then back at the alien beings who had appeared in his clearing with an impossible request. Give me a few minutes to pack some things. As the human disappeared into his dwelling to gather his primitive medical supplies, Dr. Vorn felt a mixture of hope and terror. They were about to gamble the fate of the galaxy on the crude blood, chemistry of a being whose entire civilization was still confined to a single world. But sometimes the longest shots were the only shots worth taking. David Brooks stood in the center of what was undoubtedly the most advanced medical facility in the galaxy and felt completely out of place. The Imperial Medical Bay stretched out before him like a cathedral of healing technology, its crystalline walls pulsing with diagnostic energies that his primitive eyes could barely comprehend. Floating surgical platforms moved through the air without visible support, while holographic displays showed medical data in languages he could not read. But none of that impressive technology was helping the dying woman on the bed of living light. Before him, Empress Lyraheth looked nothing like any human he had ever seen, yet David recognized the signs of critical illness immediately. Her translucent skin had taken on the grayish pallor he had seen too many times in field hospitals. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, and the bioluminescent veins beneath her skin flickered weakly like dying Christmas lights. Dr. Kyle Vorn hovered anxiously beside the Imperial bed, his six-fingered hands dancing over control crystals that monitored every aspect of the Empress's condition. As you can see, her life signs continue to deteriorate. We estimate she has less than 12 hours remaining. David nodded and pulled out his simple medical kit. The leather bag looked pathetically crude next to the advanced medical equipment surrounding them, but it contained everything he had learned to rely on during his years as a combat medic. Basic diagnostic tools, antibiotics, pain medication, IV supplies, and a small field surgery kit that had saved more lives than he could count. "I need to examine her directly," he announced. The assembled alien physicians recoiled in horror. Dr. Naya's blue-tinted skin went pale. "That is impossible. The Empress's physiology is incredibly delicate. Direct contact with foreign organisms could kill her instantly." "Your scanners are very impressive," David replied, pulling on a pair of simple latex gloves. "But sometimes you need to actually touch the patient to understand what is wrong." "This is madness," protested Dr. Zuran, a crystalline being whose geometric form shifted anxiously. "We have sensors that can analyze her condition down to the quantum level. What could primitive touch possibly tell you that our instruments cannot?" David approached the bed slowly, his trained eyes taking in details that the sophisticated medical equipment had somehow missed. "Your instruments are designed to understand advanced biological systems," he explained as he gently placed his hand on the Empress's forehead. Her skin felt cold and had an unusual texture, like touching liquid mercury that had somehow become solid. "But look at what is happening here," he continued, pointing to areas where the bioluminescent veins had gone, completely dark. "This plague is not just attacking her cells, it is creating a feedback loop with your high-energy medical treatments." Dr. Vorn's antennae perked up with interest. "What do you mean?" David pulled out a simple stethoscope, a device so primitive that the alien physicians had to access their databases to understand what it was. As he listened to the Empress's breathing and heartbeat, he explained his theory. "Every time you try to treat her with advanced technology, you give the plague more complex systems to adapt to and attack. Your healing energy, your cellular regeneration fields, your quantum medical scanners, they are all feeding this thing and making it stronger." The silence that followed was deafening. These beings had spent centuries developing the most sophisticated medical technology imaginable, and a primitive human was telling them that their advancement was killing their patient. "That is impossible," Dr. Zuran insisted. "Our medical systems are designed to work in harmony with all known forms of life." "But this plague is not known," David replied. "It is something new, something that specifically targets advanced biological systems. Every time you try to cure her with high-tech medicine, you are giving it exactly what it needs to spread." He opened his medical kit and began laying out supplies that looked like museum pieces compared to the advanced equipment surrounding them. Glass vials of antibiotics, plastic tubes for IV lines, and a simple blood pressure cuff that worked purely through mechanical pressure. "What I am proposing is the opposite approach," David explained. "Instead of fighting this plague with advanced technology, we treat the Empress like any other critically ill patient. Basic supportive care, simple medications, and if necessary, a direct blood transfusion. The word transfusion sent shockwaves through the assembled medical team. Dr. Vaughn's twin hearts nearly stopped beating. You want to introduce your primitive blood directly into the Empress's circulatory system? That is exactly what I want to do, David confirmed. My blood contains iron-based oxygen carriers and immune cells that have been trained by evolution to attack anything foreign without sophisticated recognition protocols. The plague feeds on complexity, but human immune systems are about as simple and aggressive as they come. Dr. Naya was frantically accessing medical databases. The biological incompatibility alone could trigger massive organ failure. Human blood chemistry is completely different from Asterian physiology. Different enough that the plague might not recognize it as a threat until it is too late, David countered. Sometimes the best way to fight a sophisticated enemy is with simple, overwhelming force. Chancellor Mira entered the medical bay at that moment, her serpentine form coiled with stress. Behind her came Admiral Rex Kane and General Theron, their faces grim with the latest reports from the front lines. The Shadow Fleet has broken through our outer defenses, Admiral Kane announced. Without the Empress's psychic network to coordinate our response, they are picking off our ships one by one. We have perhaps 6 hours before they reach Astros Prime. The situation in the outer systems is deteriorating rapidly, added General Theron. 3 more worlds have declared independence and civil war has broken out in the Vega sector. We need the Empress back online now, or there will be nothing left to save. David looked around at the desperate faces surrounding him. These beings had built a civilization that spanned the galaxy, developed technologies that seemed like magic to his primitive understanding, and maintained peace between countless species for thousands of years. But now they were faced with a problem that all their advancement could not solve. The choice is simple, he said quietly. We can try the transfusion, or we can watch your empire collapse. Those are the only options left. Dr. Vaughan was quiet for a long moment, his medical training warring with the desperate need to save his Empress. Finally, he activated the communication system. All medical personnel clear the bay. We are attempting an experimental procedure. As the other physicians reluctantly withdrew, David began setting up his simple IV equipment. The plastic tubing and basic needles looked absurdly primitive next to the sophisticated medical technology, but they would do the job they were designed for. I need you to understand something, he told Dr. Vaughan as he prepared the IV lines. Where I come from, we have a saying, sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. Your plague is designed to counter advanced biological systems, but it has never encountered anything as crude and aggressive as human blood. The Empress's breathing became more labored as they worked. Her bioluminescence had faded to barely visible flickers, and the neural crown above her head was beginning to lose its crystalline structure. If this works, Dr. Vaughan said quietly, you will have saved not just the Empress, but billions of lives across the galaxy. And if it does not work? David asked, inserting the IV needle into his own arm with practiced ease. Then we will have lost everything trying the only option we had left. David watched his own red blood begin to flow through the simple plastic tubing toward the dying alien ruler. Somewhere in that primitive iron-rich fluid were billions of immune cells that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution on a harsh world. They had never encountered anything like the Void Plague, but they had one advantage that all the galaxy's advanced medical technology lacked. They were too simple to know they were supposed to lose. As the first drops of human blood entered the Empress's circulatory system, David Brooks closed his eyes and hoped that sometimes the oldest solutions really were the best ones. The transformation began within minutes, but not in the way anyone expected. David Brooks felt the change first as a strange tingling in his arm, where the IV line connected him to the dying Empress. His simple human blood was flowing into an alien, circulatory system that operated on principles he could barely understand. But somehow his body seemed to know what was needed. Dr. Cale Vaughan watched the monitoring crystals in amazement as impossible readings began to appear on the displays. The Empress's cellular activity, which had been declining steadily for days, suddenly spiked upward. But more importantly, the signatures of the Void Plague began to change in ways that defied every medical principle he knew. "What is happening?" whispered Dr. Naya, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the microscopic battle taking place inside the Empress's body. The answer was visible in stunning detail on the quantum-level scanners. Human white blood cells, primitive by galactic standards but aggressive beyond anything in the medical databases, were encountering the Void Plague for the first time. The plague, a perfect predator designed to counter advanced biological systems, found itself facing something it had never been programmed to handle. David's immune cells did not try to understand the plague or adapt to its sophisticated attack patterns. They simply attacked everything that did not belong in the system they were designed to protect. Billions of white blood cells swarmed through the Empress's circulatory system like an army of microscopic warriors, destroying plague organisms through sheer overwhelming numbers and determination. The plague cannot adapt to them, Dr. Vorn realized with growing excitement. It is designed to counter sophisticated immune responses, but human immune cells are too primitive for it to recognize as a threat until they are already attacking. The bioluminescent veins beneath the Empress's skin began to brighten for the first time in weeks. The sickly green color that had marked the plague's presence was being replaced by the healthy golden glow that her subjects remembered from better times. But the most dramatic change was in the neural crown above her head. The living organism that connected the Empress to every world in her domain had been withering away as its host weakened. Now it began to regenerate at visible speed, its crystalline structure rebuilding itself as new neural connections formed. Across the galaxy, beings who had felt only emptiness and confusion for days suddenly felt the familiar presence of their Empress returning to their minds. But the victory was not without cost. David felt his strength draining away as the transfusion continued. The biological connection between him and the Empress was becoming stronger with each passing minute, and his human metabolism was not designed to sustain such a link. His skin grew pale, and his breathing became labored as his body struggled to support both himself and the alien ruler whose life now depended on his blood. "We need to stop the transfusion," Dr. Naya urged, her medical training overriding her amazement at the successful treatment. "The human cannot sustain this level of biological stress." "No," David gasped, his voice weak but determined. "Not yet. The plague is still fighting back." He was right. The monitoring system showed that while the human immune cells were winning the battle, pockets of the Void Plague remained active in the deeper tissues of the Empress's body. If the transfusion stopped too early, the plague might recover and spread again. David closed his eyes and focused on staying conscious as his life force slowly transferred to the dying alien ruler. He had seen this kind of sacrifice before in field hospitals, when medics gave their own blood to save wounded soldiers. The human body could survive losing a lot of blood, but there were limits to what any organism could endure. Chancellor Mira burst into the medical bay with urgent news from the battlefront. "The Shadow Fleet is approaching the inner defense perimeter. Our ships are falling back in disorder without proper coordination. We need the Empress conscious and active within the hour, or Astro's Prime will fall." As if responding to the urgency, in her voice the Empress's eyes suddenly opened. For the first time in weeks they blazed with the inner light that had made her the most powerful being in known space. The neural crown above her head flared to full brilliance, sending psychic signals racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. Admiral Rex Kane felt the change immediately through his command implants. The chaotic radio chatter from the Imperial fleet suddenly organized itself as the Empress's consciousness touched the mind of every ship commander simultaneously. Orders began flowing with perfect coordination, and the scattered defensive formations reformed with precision that only psychic communication could achieve. "All ships, this is Empress Lyra Eth." Her voice rang out across every communication channel in the Empire. "I live, and I fight. Rally to the defense of our worlds." The effect on the Imperial forces was electrifying. Ships that had been retreating in panic suddenly turned to face the enemy with renewed courage. The Shadow Fleet, which had been counting on the continued chaos and confusion in the Imperial ranks, found themselves facing a coordinated defense that materialized around them like a closing trap. But even as victory in the space battle became assured, David Brooks was paying the price for saving an empire. His vital signs were failing rapidly as the biological link between him and the Empress continued to drain his strength. Dr. Vorn worked frantically to stabilize him with what primitive medical equipment they could quickly adapt, but human physiology was outside his area of expertise. His cellular structure is breaking down, Dr. Naya reported with growing alarm. The psychic link is too much for his nervous system to handle. We are losing him. David opened his eyes one last time and looked at the alien beings who surrounded his bedside. Through the fog of exhaustion and approaching unconsciousness, he managed a weak smile. Did it work? He whispered. Dr. Vorn knelt beside the simple medical cot where the human lay dying. You saved us all, he said quietly. The Empress lives, the plague is defeated, and the Empire is secure. Your sacrifice will be remembered for as long as our civilization endures. David nodded slowly, his breath coming in short gasps. Good. That is what we do. We protect people. The monitoring equipment registered the moment his heart stopped beating. David Brooks, a simple medic from a primitive world, had given his life to save a galactic empire. His crude iron-based blood, flowing through an alien ruler's veins, had accomplished what the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy could not. But death was not the end of his story. The Empress, now fully recovered and blazing with renewed power, stood beside his still form. The neural crown above her head pulsed with energies that reached across dimensions, and for a brief moment, the boundaries between life and death became negotiable. No, she said simply, and reached out with power that could reshape reality itself. David's eyes opened and he drew a shuddering breath. The biological link that had nearly killed him was still there, but now it flowed both ways. The Empress's incredible life force was sustaining him just as his primitive immune system continued to protect her from any return of the plague. How? Dr. Vorn asked in amazement. He gave me his life, the Empress replied, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in multiple dimensions. I have given him mine in return. We are bound together now, his simple strength supporting my complex power, my advanced biology sustaining his primitive form. Outside the medical bay, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The Shadow Fleet was in full retreat, their ships scattered by the suddenly coordinated Imperial defense. The rebellious worlds were surrendering as they felt their Empress's presence return to their minds. Order was being restored with a speed that seemed miraculous to those who had witnessed the chaos of the past weeks. David sat up slowly, marveling at the strange sensations flowing through his body. He could feel the Empress's thoughts at the edge of his consciousness, and through her the faint whispers of a trillion minds across the galaxy. What happens now? He asked. The Empress smiled, her face radiant with renewed health and power. Now we rebuild, and we remember that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from complexity, but from the simple determination to never give up. Dr. Vorn immediately began documenting everything that had happened, knowing that this event would revolutionize galactic medicine. The Brooks Protocol, as it came to be known, would require every advanced medical facility to maintain supplies of primitive biological materials and simple treatment methods alongside their sophisticated technology. But more than that, the entire galactic community would never again dismiss a species as too primitive to be useful. Earth was immediately granted full membership in the Galactic Confederation, not as a junior partner, but as the world whose simple courage had saved them all. David Brooks became the first human ambassador to the galactic community, though he never forgot his humble origins as a mountain medic who had simply wanted to help people. The bond between him and the Empress ensured that humanity would always have a voice in galactic affairs, and that the wisdom of simple solutions would never be forgotten. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, other threats stirred and plotted against the civilized worlds. But now they would have to face not just the advanced technology of a galactic empire, but the stubborn, primitive, utterly relentless determination of humanity. Sometimes the best defense against complexity is simplicity, And sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the refusal of ordinary people to let others die on their watch. The emergency beacon pierced through hyperspace like a scream in the night, carrying a message that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Within hours of its transmission, the space around Astro's prime filled with ships of every conceivable design, their hulls gleaming with the emblems of 100 different worlds. Dr. Cale Vorn stood in the observation deck of the Imperial Medical Center, watching as the largest gathering of alien minds in recorded history assembled to save one life. The irony was not lost on him. These beings, who could rarely agree on trade routes or territorial boundaries, had united instantly when faced with the potential collapse of the empire that kept the peace between them. The first to arrive were the Deep Mind Collective, their massive bioships pulsing with neural activity visible from orbit. These tentacled beings shared a hive consciousness that spanned their entire species, making them incredibly effective at processing complex problems. Their representative, a creature whose name roughly translated to many thoughts as one, had proposed an immediate consciousness transfer. The Empress's mind can be preserved in our quantum storage matrices, the being explained through its translation device, its hundreds of tentacles writhing with excitement at the technological challenge. We have successfully maintained the consciousness of our own leaders for millennia, beyond their physical death. Dr. Vorn had been forced to explain why this would not work. The Empress is not just an individual mind. She is the focal point of the neural crown, a living organism that has grown with her since birth. Without her specific biological signature, the crown dies, and with it, the psychic network that holds the empire together. The Synth-Arcs had arrived next, their ship a perfect fusion of organic curves and mechanical precision. These beings had long ago abandoned the limitations of purely biological existence, enhancing themselves with cybernetic implants until the line between flesh and machine became meaningless. Their leader, a being called the Synthesis, had offered to share their most advanced biotechnology. Organic systems fail because they are imperfect, the Synthesis had argued, its voice a harmony of natural speech and electronic modulation. Grant us permission to enhance the Empress with our cybernetic components. The plague cannot attack what it cannot recognize as alive. But Dr. Vorn's tests had already shown that the Void Plague was not limited by such distinctions. It attacked synthetic systems just as readily as organic ones, as if it could somehow recognize and target the concept of organized existence itself. The Oracle worlds had sent their response through quantum entanglement, their ancient AI networks, processing probability matrices at speeds that defied comprehension. Their message had been brief and devastating. Insufficient data. Unknown variables make calculation impossible. Probability of success with current methods approaches zero. Even the cosmic entities had begun to respond. The first to make contact were the cosmic gardeners, beings of such immense scale that their physical forms existed partially outside normal spacetime. They claimed responsibility for seeding life throughout the galaxy, carefully nurturing young civilizations until they were ready to join the galactic community. We have guided evolution on 1,000,000 worlds, their representative had communicated through reality-bending gravitational waves that the Imperial translators barely managed to interpret. We can accelerate the Empress's natural healing processes, compress millions of years of genetic adaptation into days. Dr. Vorn had watched in fascination and horror as the gardener's intervention actually made the plague worse. The accelerated cellular activity gave it more complex systems to attack, and the Empress's condition deteriorated faster than ever. The cosmic being had withdrawn in confusion, admitting that in all their eons of experience, they had never encountered anything that grew stronger when faced with greater complexity. Days passed in a blur of failed attempts. The quantum monks, who existed partially in higher dimensions, tried to phase the plague out of reality. Instead, it learned to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Time Weavers offered to reverse the Empress's personal timeline to before the infection began, but the plague proved to be resistant to temporal manipulation, as if it existed outside normal cause and effect. Chancellor Mira had grown increasingly desperate as reports came in from across the Empire. The outer worlds were beginning to panic. Without the stabilizing influence of the Empress's psychic presence, old grudges and territorial disputes were flaring into violence. The Asteroid Miners Union had declared independence from the core worlds. 3 separate species were claiming rights to the same mining system, and skirmishes had already begun. "We are running out of time," she announced during the daily council meeting. Her serpentine form coiled so tightly with stress that her scales had begun to shed. "The governors of the Rim territories are demanding to know when normal communication will be restored. Our trading partners are threatening to suspend all agreements until the crisis is resolved." Admiral Rex Kane had been spending his time coordinating the defense of critical systems as the Empire's military structure began to strain without the Empress's unifying presence. His cybernetic components whirred constantly as he processed reports from a dozen different battlefronts. "It gets worse," he announced grimly. "The Shadow Fleet has emerged from the Dark Zone. They have been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Long-range scouts report at least 50 ships moving toward the core worlds. The Shadow Fleet was every Imperial citizen's nightmare, composed of exiles, criminals, and beings who had rejected the peaceful coexistence of the Empire. They had spent centuries building their strength in the empty spaces between galaxies. They struck only when the Empire was weak, raiding worlds on the frontier before disappearing back into the darkness." General Theron slammed his armored fist against the council table. "We cannot fight a war while our command structure is falling apart. Without the Empress, our coordination between fleets is reduced to primitive radio communications. They will cut us apart piece by piece." Dr. Vorn felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Every hour that passed brought new reports of his failures. The latest attempt, involving nanomachines programmed to repair cellular damage, had backfired so spectacularly that the Empress had nearly died on the spot. The plague had somehow corrupted the nanomachines' programming, turning them into another vector for its spread. "We need to think differently," he announced suddenly, causing all conversation in the room to stop. "Every species that has tried to help us has been more advanced than the last. More sophisticated technology, more complex biological systems, more elaborate approaches to the problem. But what if we have been thinking about this backwards?" "What do you mean?" asked Chancellor Mira. Dr. Vorn activated the holographic display, showing the latest cellular analysis of the plague's progression. "Look at the pattern. The plague specifically targets complexity. The more advanced the biological system, the faster it spreads. The more sophisticated the technology we use against it, the stronger it becomes. What if the solution is not more complexity but less?" Admiral Kane's cybernetic eye focused intently on the display. "You are suggesting we use primitive technology?" "I am suggesting we look beyond our usual allies," Dr. Vorn replied. "There are species in our contact databases that we have never approached because their technology is too primitive to be useful. Worlds where beings still use crude chemical compounds for medicine, where healing is accomplished through simple biological processes rather than advanced manipulation of matter and energy." General Theron leaned forward, his battle-scarred face thoughtful. "Species that the plague might not recognize as sophisticated enough to attack effectively." "Exactly. The very primitiveness that makes these species seem useless to us might be exactly what we need." Chancellor Mira was quiet for a long moment, her forked tongue tasting the air as she considered the implications. "You want us to contact pre-spaceflight civilizations? That violates every first contact protocol in the Imperial Charter." "The Charter was written to protect the Empire," Dr. Vorn replied. "Without the Empress, there will be no Empire left to protect." The Council fell silent. In the distance, they could hear the sound of ships launching from the orbital defense platforms. The Shadow Fleet was still days away, but preparation for the defense of Astro's Prime had already begun. Without the Empress's psychic network to coordinate their efforts, it would be a desperate fight. "Begin the search," Chancellor Mira finally commanded. "Access every database, every survey report, every first contact evaluation. Find us a species primitive enough that their medicine might actually work where ours has failed." Dr. Vorn bowed and activated his personal communication device. Within minutes, teams of researchers across the capital were beginning the most unusual medical consultation in galactic history. Somewhere among the primitive worlds of the galaxy's spiral arms, Hope waited in the simple wisdom of beings who had never learned to reach for the stars. As the search began, the Empress's life, signs continued to fade, and the clock continued to tick toward the collapse of everything they had built.